My name is Arlene Hall, and my business is Island Organics, soap and candle manufacturing company. We create handmade organic skincare, bath and body care, organic candles, and other body supplies. About 5 years ago, I experienced something with one of my daughters who had gotten psoriasis, and I thought of all the things we can do to help her. So I wanted to use bush medicine on her skin and thought of a way that I can incorporate it in something that she can use every day. And I discovered soap making, and that's how Island Organics started. Because of that grant from Invest TCI, I was able to do a lot of the things I wanted to do to expand the soap business. The rewarding part is actually hearing the stories from the customers who've used our products. I would say take the leap, get your business license, get all of your ducks in a row, and go and make the application, because they make it as simple and as easy, and they actually help to get you through the process of obtaining the grant. So it's been a dream and it's been very easy. So I would say go ahead and provide all the information that's necessary and apply for the grant.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this third session of our five-part webinar series that is conducted by Invest TCI and hosted by those of us at TCI Backyard Farmers. This week's session of Backyard Farming for Profit, taking your backyard to the next level, is actually going to be facilitated by none other than Mr. Vassel Stewart. And this week's session is captioned Creating Partnership for Supply, How to Get Your Products to the Market. So Mr. Stewart is going to be in today telling us how to get our stuff on the shelves, people. Yeah, so let me just give you a little background knowledge of Mr. Stewart here. Mr. Vassel Stewart is the CEO of Woodsman Caribbean Limited, CEO of Caribbean Agribusiness Development Company, CADCO, President of the Caribbean Agribusiness Association, that's CABA, and a member of the CARICOM Agriculture, Food, and Nutrition Cluster. Mr. Stewart is an agribusiness and international marketing development specialist with over 30 years of diversified and practical experience in agribusiness value chain development in the Caribbean, gained through working with national, regional, and international public and private sector organizations in various positions, including CEO, regional manager, regional coordinator, advisor, consultant, investor, and director. Mr. Stewart, that is a mouthful. It is such an indeed pleasure to have you here, Mr. Stewart. Would you care to elaborate even further on your vast knowledge in this area, sir?
Thank you very much. I reckon that as you said, that's quite a mouthful. I don't know that I need to expand on that, other than to say it's a pleasure to participate in this series of webinar. I think the interest shown by what effectively are backyard gardeners who want to become commercial is of great interest to us in CABA, and we are very happy to be in a position to contribute. Are you with me?
Yes, I am. One of the things, I mean, it is, as you can see from what we have been doing so far in your knowledge on Turks and Caicos, agriculture is pretty much new to us, especially this new generation. Our history says that we have a lot of knowledge in terms of agriculture, but at present, it's pretty much non-existent in terms of our business, the businesses that we conduct. So having someone like you come in, we're going to need much guidance in that area. And it's the starting of the farm to the end product, and as much information as you can give us, we would be open to having. So sir, we're open vessels, and we're just waiting to learn.
No, we're very happy to be able to do that, because part of our remit is really to seek to promote agribusiness development. And coming out of the whole COVID experience, we recognize that there's a renewed interest in agribusiness throughout the region. And so we're very happy to see Turks and Caicos also be in the forefront. We recognize the fact that, as you pointed out, there's not a significant level of commercial agricultural production. But the way the sector is now developing, land is important, but not the necessarily most critical factor in your ability to get involved in agricultural production. There's significant level of production now that takes place in greenhouses, in soilless media. And so the new technologies that are available will change the way we view the sector, the way we actually invest in the sector, because traditionally we see it as a very land-driven exercise, and I would imagine that Turks and Caicos may not have the best quality soils. But given the technologies that are available to us now, that ought not to be a significant impediment. And in some ways, it may be an advantage, because it then forces entrepreneurs to focus on high-level technologies. So we think that the very fact that there are people with interest is a critical first step. Let me begin by thanking Trina and Ezran for the opportunity to participate in this very interesting series of webinars. I would also like to, on behalf of CABA, extend our congratulations to the aspiring entrepreneurs. I think it's an interesting one to see that there are so many people who have the level of interest in moving from what I assume now is either a hobby or subsistent type operation into a commercial operation that augurs well for the food security of Turks and Caicos. My task is to seek to assist these budding entrepreneurs into making decisions on the basis of sound information and sound decision-making process. And so this evening, I'm going to seek to address the issue that was raised as to how can these aspiring agri-entrepreneurs create partnerships for supply and to ensure that they get access to secure markets. That is how to get your products to the market in a secure and sustainable way. So I'm going to speak to how I think this can be done, and hopefully will provide you with a good roadmap moving forward. Okay, next slide, please. So the question is how to create partnerships to get your products to market. And I would respond to that with a fairly straightforward answer. First, one has to convince buyers that you have the capacity and the commitment to meet their needs and that working with you can increase the profitability or indeed their market reputation. So it may not necessarily be that a company gets involved because they see immediate opportunity for profits, but they may seek to get involved because it may meet other company objectives. So if a company, for example, has a commitment to good corporate responsibility, they may seek to work with a group such as the backyard gardeners or farmers to position their company better in terms of redounding of increasing their profits. So your challenge is going to be able to convince potential buyers that you have the capacity, you have the commitment to meet their needs. Question then becomes, how do you go about determining what their needs are? Next question. Next slide, please. So what we've sought to do here is to provide you with an indication of how you can convince potential buyers to become your partners. And we have laid out a number of critical steps. Number one being that you need to conduct market research so that you understand the needs of the market. Secondly, having understood the needs of the market, you then need to determine which segments in the market you'd wish to target. And that's, of course, based on your capacity to satisfy those identified needs. You then also need to determine how you will position yourself, or if in this case, the backyard gardeners were to come together to form a company, how you position the company, what is the unique value proposition that you're offering, meaning what it is that your company or you yourself as an entrepreneur can offer a potential buyer that would be different, more attractive, provide them with greater profits, provide them with greater public positioning than they can get from either the existing suppliers or from other contending suppliers, others who are maybe competing with you. What about your capacity? What about the products? What about the services that you're providing that are so different that the potential partner would say, hey, I want to work with you instead of the others? Once you have done that, that is only positioning yourself. You then need to provide evidence that you have the resources to deliver on this unique value proposition. You then need to communicate your capacity to deliver it, because saying that you have it is one thing, but then demonstrating it is another. Once you've gotten to the point where you can convince a potential buyer, a group of buyers to work with you, to partner with you, then you want to move to the next level where you seek to establish some level of formal arrangement. It may not be a binding contract in terms of a legally written document, but it may be terms and conditions that both parties are committed to fulfilling. Having done that, then you need to establish some kind of mechanism to allow you, or in fact, to allow both parties to monitor and to manage that partnership. So I'm going to go into some more detail on each of these 7 critical points to provide you with some greater clarity as to how you may proceed in this regard. So the issue of how to conduct a market research, or what are the issues rather, not so much how, because this particular webinar will not allow us to go into the actual details of how to, but rather what is it that you're seeking to determine in conducting the market research. So the issues that you want to answer is what it is that the potential partner is seeking. Is it that their current suppliers are not providing enough of the products that they're seeking or enough of the services that they're seeking? Is it that they are looking for lower prices? Is it that the quality is not up to scratch and they are looking for better quality? Or maybe the products are not produced in a way that they consider safe enough. You know, food safety now is a major concern for most buyers. Or is it that the consistency of supply is not there? Maybe the buyer would like to get a supplier who could provide just-in-time delivery. meaning that they then don't have to undertake the challenges of storage, storage cost and storage. During storage, you may have deterioration or spoilage of products. So especially if it's fresh produce, a buyer may want to have a supplier who could supply consistently and just at the right time. Or it may be that the buyer is seeking to find suppliers who could provide better credit terms. They may be buying from current buyers, suppliers who want cash on delivery or who want to be paid in 7 days. And a 30-day credit provider may be a more attractive option. Or it could well be that they're looking for a combination, various combinations of the above variables: supply, certainty, lower prices, better quality, greater food security, consistency, and perhaps credit terms. So you need to understand which of these or how many of these variables a particular buyer or group of buyers may be seeking. Next slide, please. Having done that, then you need to ask yourself, which market segment would you want to participate in? You may want to go directly to consumers. So you have what is called a B2C, business to consumer market strategy. In this case, you may be supplying an independent group of consumers, maybe in your own village, in your own locality. You see opportunity to do direct home delivery, or you may set up a roadside stall, for example, where consumers will come and buy directly from you. Or one may see the opportunity for the backyard gardeners to work with, as a group, perhaps to work with other consumer groups, maybe work with your diabetes association. If you're producing healthy, safe vegetables, for example, you may want to work with your church group. So you may be supplying not individuals who may arbitrarily come to purchase from you or who may buy from you based on their particular needs at a specific time, but you have a more formal arrangement with a group of buyers. They are still consumers, but they operate in a more collective way. Or you may be of a size, or your operation may be of a size that allow you to supply to other businesses, maybe institutional buyers, such as restaurants, could be hotels, maybe canteens in government organizations, or maybe other catering companies. Or you may supply retailers, supermarkets, green groceries, roadside vendors, could be part of the market you target. Or if you're really large, you may want to look at supplying manufacturers, maybe companies that are involved, let's say, in a pepper sauce manufacturer, for example. A large bakery, you may want to supply with certain types of vegetables or maybe root crops for that matter that they could use to make, let's say, gluten-free products. So you'll have to look to see, given your capacity, which of these market segments you may find most attractive. Or you may get large enough, if you function, for example, as a group, you could target export markets. So you have to determine, given your capacity, given the needs, which market segments you may find most attractive. Next slide. You then need to look at how you position the company or position the business. So it means that you have to identify which of the needs that you have identified from the market study that you are going to seek to supply. And this will be based on those that you determine that you're best positioned, you're best capable, based on your unique value proposition. What are you offering, as I said before, that others are not able to offer, or not able to offer as well as you are able to do? And that then allow you to say, okay, I'm going to position myself based on the fact that I have the best quality. I could provide you with the lowest price, or I have a mix of quality and price that no one else can match, or I could deliver to you every week at a time when it's most appropriate for you, so that you get the freshest product. So you have to look at among the demands or the needs of a particular market and your capability, how you're going to position yourself in the marketplace. Next slide. Having done that, then you have to then demonstrate that you have the capacity. You must put in place the resources that demonstrate your capacity to deliver on this value proposition, on this promise that you're making to the potential partner. You must have the requisite human resources, people who are trained, who have the experience, who are committed to ensuring that the value proposition that you're promising to your potential partner, that you have people who are capable and committed to deliver. Then what is the production system you have in place to support that? And if you're going beyond that into value added, what is the processing capacity? What do you have in place to guarantee that you can not only produce at the primary level, but if you're adding value, that you have the capacity to add value? Or you're going to distribute this product to your potential partner. And perhaps most important, your financing capacity. What do you have in place to support your business so that not only can you ensure that you can meet the issues such as quality and regularity, but you are sustainable over time. The companies may not want to get involved if they figure, well, you may be here today and go on tomorrow. Now, how are you going to, what are the ways in which you could seek to organize this? You could do this through, if you're large enough, or if you feel that you can best operate on your own, by being an individual entrepreneur, and then you target markets that are consistent with your size. Or you may want to do so by entering into some kind of legal collective entity. So for example, you may want to do so through a cooperative or producer association or through a limited liability company. So the current backyard gardeners who are seeking to become more commercial or become commercial would need to look at whether they want to operate as individuals or whether they want to operate collectively. And if collectively, what is the best legal mechanism? What's the best entity that could get you to market in a way that you could establish those kinds of sustainable partnerships? We'd argue that the larger the market, the greater the need for a collective approach. So that would ensure that you will have the resources to meet demand. As I said before, proof of capacity is something that you'd have to demonstrate for any serious buyer to be convinced that they want to get into a long-term arrangement. We'd also argue that the collective approach will be the one that we argue makes perhaps the most sense, especially when you are a startup operation. A buyer may have more confidence if they feel that there are a number of suppliers involved. You have greater capacity, you have greater credibility. Your risk of not being able to supply would be lower. And that is regardless of the target market, whether you're going after a business to business or even business to consumer. The collective approach normally provides greater certainty of a capacity to meet commitments. Next slide. Next point, of course, is then how do you put in place the resources to demonstrate the capacity that you can deliver? I would argue that a joint venture, a limited liability company, in the case of a group like yours, might be the best way to do that. And I say that because even though there are other options, you could go the route of co-op, and very often cooperatives are promoted as good business vehicles for groups, especially small entrepreneurs, to get involved in. Usually it's because it's a profit. It's a company that is a legal entity rather that normally does not pay tax. In fact, I think it always the case that cooperatives are income tax-free entities. So part of the attraction usually is that you form a co-op because not only do you find opportunities for government support, sometimes international grant funds, but the company or your income is not subjected, the income of the company that is not your personal income is not subjected to tax. But our experience has also shown that it's usually not a very sustainable entity, perhaps because of our socialization in the region, that because in a cooperative, it's one man, one vote, meaning that if, for example, one of your partners in the group is supplying, let's say, 10% of the company sale, someone else supplying virtually nothing, 0.1%, that person has the same ability to influence the company through their votes, because it's one man, one vote. So regardless of how much you contribute, you have the same vote as anyone else. And that usually results in challenges in the company, because what tends to happen is that those who contribute very little want to have, or sometimes demand, more say than those who contribute a lot. And our experience is that those normally don't work very well in the region, except perhaps for the credit unions. And that's because there's a kind of different type of vehicle. So whereas you may have several options, you could have a not-for-profit association. So it could be, for example, the Backyard Producers Association. And that could be a legal not-for-profit body. You could establish, as I said, a legal limited liability company or a co-op. That, of course, would be something that the group would look at, given the dynamics within the group. We are just saying, from our experience, the limited liability companies tend to work better. Next. So, having looked at all of that, the next issue that comes to mind is, how do you then communicate effectively your value proposition? How do you create awareness, particularly to the targeted market? How do you let them know what it is that you're offering? So part of your plan must be a communication strategy. And usually at an early stage, such as this group would have, you'd want to look at, how do you raise awareness of a company? Or perhaps you'd want to also brand your products. So do you create awareness of the brand? And that is all towards acquiring buyers, because if people know what you're offering, are convinced that you have a unique value proposition, then your ability to attract buyers would, of course, becomes greater. The more people are aware, the greater your potential to negotiate, because it means that there may be more buyers who are seeking to establish relationships with you. And we have indicated, of course, there are a number of different ways in which you can promote your company or your brand. Of course, everyone now looks forward to that you have a website or a web page. The power of social media is well known. However, that doesn't mean that you want to neglect traditional channels or media that you can use to promote your company, whether it's radio, TV, magazine, billboard. And in a case like Backyard Gardeners, I think government publicity programs would often be available. It's usually, obviously, free of cost, have wide exposure to the public, and therefore you can get significant amount of public exposure at little or no cost. The essential thing to note that you would need to have some plan as to how you're going to create this awareness about your company, about your individual business, and what it is that you offer. Next slide. However, when you have done all of that, you still haven't completed the process. You need now to establish a formal arrangement with your business partner. It may be that you are so convincing that a company or companies may want to get involved in contractual arrangements. It will become legally binding arrangements, or it may be more loose arrangements where there are no legal commitment, there are no signed contracts, but there are commitment for regular orders. And there's, if you like, a gentleman agreement. The more you can make the agreement binding, that there is something in writing, and there are specifics relating to price, to quantities, to quality, delivery schedule, issues that may arise, what are the consequences, for example, if you fail to live up to your delivery commitment, or if a buyer is unable to take the product for whatever reason, how would that be dealt with? If there are disputes that may arise, which is not unusual in any kind of business relationship, how would these be treated? What are the arrangements in place to treat with those? You don't want to establish contracts that are consistent with the terms of your capacity. You don't want to then commit to delivery, whether it's in terms of volume or consistency or price points that are inconsistent with your ability to deliver. And you know that from the business plan that was mentioned in the first webinar session. Much was said about the need for planning and for development of a business plan that would also allow you to have greater clarity. In fact, much of what I'm saying here tonight would actually be part of a business plan. One of the things that usually happen for groups like yours is that before you go to finding a business partner, you may want to, in fact, establish your own market. You may want to establish a village market, a green grocery, or in this case, let's say a backyard gardeners market, as you would for, say, a farmer's market. If you do that, you still need to establish some formal relationship between the members and this marketing entity, because you still have an obligation to insist that you have a structured way of ensuring that your buyers, whether they are individual consumers or a group of consumers, or as I said before, could be a formal arrangement with institutional buyers. But you would need to ensure that you have some kind of agreement that allows for effective planning, both for you as a producer, if you have independent distributors, if you have larger buyers who are dependent on you. I know much was said about the potential in Turks and Caicos to supply the hotel industry, for example. Those are markets that you have to have very well-defined relationships with, because their requirements are so precise and so time sensitive. And finally, you need to put in place some form of mechanism, something that would allow you to effectively monitor the relationship. So you could determine, one, if your members are actually planting when they're supposed to, if they're having challenges with production, they may have quality issues, they may have issues arising from pest and disease. You need to know that so you could take appropriate action. You may have to source products in the interim from outside of the group to fulfill your commitments. So part of what would become essential is a mechanism that allows you to monitor and to manage that partnership. So I hope I would have provided you with some indication of how you could get to market in a structured way, in a way that would ensure that you have a sustainable partnership. It's in fact really no different from traditional marketing. You need to plan, you need to ensure that you can communicate effectively to your potential buyer what it is that you are proposing to provide that you can do better than other competing suppliers. But you just can't say so. You have to demonstrate through evidence, through the physical infrastructure, through your plans, through the human resources, that you're capable of delivering on your value proposition. So I hope we would have provided you with some framework, some guidelines, some indication of the nature of the challenge that you would be undertaking in proposing to move from hobby in terms of your backyard gardening operation, or from a subsistence level to a more formal commercial operation, which is something that we at the Caribbean Agribusiness Association would strongly support and would wish to contribute in any way we can, as we have done tonight. I look forward to the future of this initiative by the Invest Turks and Caicos, and see how we at CABA can continue to work with you as you seek to develop this. Thank you very much.
Wonderful presentation, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you.
Yes. We didn't have many attendees here this evening. And I mean, it's something to be honest with you. I was expecting, it kind of is a daunting venture to go on, to take your backyard farm from the callaloo that you present in the mornings and the couple of tomatoes and whatnot to really venture out on there. But I know that we do have one particular participant that is in here that I know she puts her mind to it. She is definitely going to do what she needs to be doing. Um, but one of the questions that I would like to ask, and I would really prefer if I'd gotten an answer in terms of TCMS, but it might be something that you can guide them on. But for a new industry, as well, like I said, it's kind of what was old is now new again. Um, for farming, the resources for us, in particular here in the Turks and Caicos, to be able to carry out that research itself, we're pretty much going to be starting from scratch. Is there any advice that you could give? Because we have persons listening in via Facebook and the like. Is there any advice that you would give in terms of how to go about conducting such research in such a market?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have a very intimate knowledge or understanding of the market is structured in Turks and Caicos. I'm assuming that it's similar to the rest of the region, which would suggest that you have most of your foods being imported. You'll have perhaps a few large importers who supply perhaps your supermarket, those who supply the hotel industry. So that if the perhaps at this stage of the development of this new initiative, let me say first, don't be discouraged by the fact that you have limited number of people at the outset. You know, in Jamaica, we have a saying that one cocoa full basket, right?
That's right.
So it's a start, and it will always require those with a vision to lead the process. So the mere fact that you had people who have an interest, maybe 2 or 3 persons. So to get back to the fundamental issue as to how we might go about the market research, I'm assuming that through the Ministry of Agriculture and through Invest TCI, that you'll have access to import data that would first give you an understanding of the size of the market. So from a more macro point of view, what are the levels of imports of vegetables, of fruits? Livestock may be a challenge at this stage, although I could see possibilities for, let's say, chicken production. Well, let's focus more on the fruits and vegetable component. So first stage would be to get data that is perhaps readily available from secondary sources. So that import data, which I'm sure I could point you to where that data may be available if it's not readily available to you from, say, the Ministry of Agriculture or Ministry of, or the Department of Trade. I'm sure they have departments or ministries. So that would be one level. Secondly, more primary research that you could conduct to identify the nature of both consumer demands. So you could carry out household or consumer level studies to find out what it is that people are seeking. For example, they may be accustomed to, let's say, iceberg lettuce, which is probably what you import. There are other types of lettuce that they may have an interest in. They may be accustomed to a certain type of imported tomato. Is it that they may have other interests or be aware of other types of other varieties of products? So what you need to do at that level is to conduct consumer surveys to understand the nature of the demand, what exactly, how they want it, when they want it. Is it, for example, if you were to grow root crops, cassava, for example, would there be a interest, a demand for frozen cassava, which is more convenient, easier to utilize, provide people with less wastage in terms of spoilage and so on. So those two levels of initial market research, the macro data that gives you an indication of what imports may be, and then you may do more direct or primary research at the consumer level or at the individual buyer level. So you could do a survey of the supermarkets, a survey of the hotels, to find out what it is that they need, where they may see opportunities for local production. It's very likely that they're using imported vegetables that they have no idea where it comes from. There's assumption that because they buy it from the US that it is safe, it is produced in a way that they may fit their positioning. A hotel may want to support a green initiative, or they may want to have positioning that suggests they have significant social responsibility positioning, and therefore sourcing from local people, sourcing from small group, sourcing from women groups, sourcing from young people, maybe part of what they want to do. So I would say that is where you would start, one macro level, secondly both macro and secondary, and then do some primary research.
Okay, that is very pertinent information, much needed. Is there any other, in terms of having, one of the things that I've noticed is every time we go through a series of, a session of crisis, you find people wanting to find ways of, I need to support myself at this point to get over that hump and really, what encouraging words that, yes, this has brought inspiration to some of us. What encouraging words would you give to those persons to let them know, continue with it?
Right. Well, part of the point you make is very consistent with the rest of the region. Every time there is a shock to the system, in just to take you back in 2008, there was a so-called food supply crisis, a food price crisis. And there was a similar kind of response across the region for countries to pay more attention to domestic supplies and the whole food security issue. And as soon as that threat was relieved, then we went back to our traditional behavior and we went back to importing and forget that we do have the capacity to produce some of our food locally. So I would say that the way that you could perhaps maintain the interest of those who have indicated that they are willing to move to the next level is to form some kind of legal entity, or perhaps even if it's not a legal entity, some kind of formal structure, right? It will not move forward unless there's a commitment to structure and to organization and to having mechanism that allows for, let's say, frequent meetings to plan. So that if it is you have, let's say, 3 or 4 persons that have an interest now, we could take, I would imagine, 1 or 2 vegetables to start with, because those may be between vegetables and perhaps herbs, may be the easiest way to start. And I would also assume that in your case, a small greenhouse or grow boxes might be a way to start. What we have found in seeking to do what you're embarking on is that in a village setting, we would normally have very often retirees who seem to have, I suppose, both the time and the commitment. And so through the let's say, retiree association, I don't know if you have a large enough retiree population to create that kind of market, but our experience here in Trinidad is that we have sought to start the backyard garden in a way that allowed for not only for the individuals to have a mechanism through which we could meet with them, provide advice and training, but also set up a village backyard garden market. So on Saturdays, they would bring to the market the products that they have produced. They could either have a barter in exchange, or they could actually sell to others who are not involved in producing. So the whole approach has to be that you have a plan, you have a formal mechanism that you could begin to demonstrate that this is a serious business. And it doesn't mean that you have to start with a large number of people. Sometimes the lower the numbers, the better it is to get it off the ground. But I think given that there's interest, given the ministries of agriculture involvement, given TCI's in commitment, that starting it with a entity could be the, as I suggested earlier on, the Backyard Gardeners Association. At the outset, it doesn't have to be a legal entity. It could just be some kind of formal mechanism that allows people to meet, have a plan. I gather from some of the previous discussion that there will be resources available, either in terms of grants or loans to get the business off the ground. And we could help with that. We could provide advice on your grow box. We could provide advice on, say, greenhouses. We have technical people here in Trinidad who actually produce greenhouses and who could provide technical advice. They could provide information on safe inputs. So there could be, we could assist you in terms of putting together a plan for this commercialization of a backyard operation.
Okay, so those resources would be available to us as well.
Yes, there may be some areas where some of it would be free advice. In the case of, let's say, for example, there was a commitment to start up with a greenhouse. We have people who could supply you commercially, that is, so that way have to be a cost with a greenhouse design. They could then provide you with technical information, and much of this could be done remotely, where there may be a need to visit, and we could find ways to address that. But I'm saying that we would be very happy to work with you to move this from an idea stage to practical and operational level.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Stewart. Mr. Stewart, just because we're going to be closing off in a couple of minutes, at about 7:30 or so. Just with your 30 years of experience in this particular industry in our region, and where I see you are also involved in internationally, what would you say has been the most problematic area or areas that you've come into play with over the years? And what would be, I wouldn't say solution, but what would be your suggestion to bettering those circumstances?
Well, in terms of, if you're posing the question in terms of the challenges in the agricultural sector in general, because you need, I would argue, clear macro policies to drive the sector. And over the years, we have had challenges in that regard, in that one government may come in and take a particular policy position, may make some initial investment, demonstrate some level of commitment, but don't follow through, either because they lose the election and therefore a new government comes in, new policy, or in some cases even from the change of a minister. So part of the lack of consistent development in the region, we have had periods where there have been significant growth, then decline, and so we've never been able to show consistent growth and development in most of the industries. That may not be true for all countries like Guyana, for example, and Belize, where agriculture is critical, show a much more consistent performance. In the other countries, like maybe yours, in Jamaica, in Barbados, in countries where tourism, and in the case of Trinidad, where oil and services are a major part of the economy, agriculture tends to take somewhat of a back seat. And it's only in cases like we now have, where there's threat to their food security, that you see the level of apparent commitment. So I would argue that the number one challenge has been inconsistent policy commitment to developing the sector. And as a solution, as a challenge, what we've argued at level of CABA is that you need strong private sector organization, which is why CABA exists actually, so that there is consistent advocacy. The private sector, once they become involved and they make the investment, not only will they consistently argue for and promote the particular industry they're involved in, or in fact the sector in general, but without strong institutions that will ensure consistent advocacy and in some cases consistent investment, then it's difficult for the sector to move forward, because you don't always get that level of consistency at the policy level. So that would be my argument. And in your case, I would suggest that with the interest shown by Invest TCI, that again, if there's a plan, and because you have, I suspect, significant domestic opportunities because of the large level of imports, if you can get private commitment and then go to the government, rather than the government being the leader, the private sector sometimes has to take the lead and say, these are the things we want to do. How can you as a government help us in moving this forward?
Okay. Wonderful. This the catch-22 about that is that policy tends to be what the people want to see. So, yeah.
Well, you need a, whether it's some form of organizational structure, because if people
Yes.
begin to advocate and, argue strongly, not saying demonstrate now, but make their voice heard in a consistent and constructive way, then the policymakers will begin to listen, especially if you have the kind of political system that we have where, it's the vote that counts at the end of the day.
Yeah, we have that. We have that. Okay, Mr. Stewart, we don't seem to have any further questions here, but in closing, are there any words you'd like to say? Any final words?
Just that we would like to work with you in moving this forward, so that what I would suggest that from tonight's discussion, perhaps once you complete this series of webinar and you know where you are, we can then work together to see how we can move this forward. I think we would have an interest from a CABA perspective to see this happen, and we have a commitment beyond that with through our MOU with your parent, right? With CADCO, that we want to promote high value or high level technology in terms of agricultural production in the region. And I think because of your unique situation, that it lends itself to that. I think the greenhouse production and water, soilless media production is something that you could look at in the term because because of the what I think high value market you have in the hotel sector. So I would suggest that once this is completed, let's speak and see how we might move this forward.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to thank you for joining us for the third session of our 5-part webinar series conducted by Invest TCI and hosted by TCI Backyard Farmers for profit, taking your backyard farm to the next level. This week's session, creating partnerships for supply, how to get your product to the market. I am Ms. Angela Freitas. Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Thank you, Invest TCI and the other team members at TCI Backyard Farmers. Have a pleasant evening. Thank you.
Well, mention Angela, you guys take care. Bye-bye.
All righty. Bye-bye.